Hello and welcome to another edition of the Commissioner's Report. I'm your host, Tricia Pichette, and joining me today is Commissioner George Lindsey.
Well, hello there. How are we doing?
Very well, thanks.
Good.
Thanks for joining us.
Look forward to it.
Now, you and the commissioners have been out and about giving State of the County addresses and meetings.
Well, it seems to be this time of year when we have the State of the Union, and then the governor gives the State of the State address. So it just seems appropriate to give a State of the County, presentation. And it comes on the heels of the County Commission's retreat, in which we review our status on prior year goals and set new goals for the coming year. And it's a kickoff of not only where we are, but where we want to be and setting priorities for the staff moving forward to adopt next year's budget. So with the various interest groups around the county, the chambers and the Kiwanis and Rotaries and other civic organizations kind of asked for a State of the County presentation. So each of us kind of customize our own, what we think is important and focus on that. And so I've made a few presentations and have a few others booked and just thought we would share some of those observations.
Fantastic.
The first is to give just a brief orientation on the map that represents the county commission districts. Polk County has a system whereby we elect commissioners at large. That means although I live and represent District 1 on the map here, the smallest area, I run countywide. So do my colleagues. The idea is to make sure that we have broad representation throughout the county and not all the commissioners are concentrated in one part of the county. But the benefit is that we still required to run countywide. And the districts are drawn based on population, not geography. You'll notice my district is the most dense, District 1, yet Mr. Wilson's District 2 is in almost the entire south half of the county. Geographically, he has 5 or 10 times the area that District 1 represents, but it's basically the same number of people. After the 2020 census, these maps will be redrawn to reflect the population shifts. Certainly the growth up in the northeast part of the county will have an impact on that. So it's anxious to see what the new district maps might be a couple of years from now after the consensus data is gathered. So that's kind of a kickoff as to how we got to where we are.
Okay.
Some of the challenges we face are, again, looking back, the recession back in the 07-08 period, where our revenues, the values of all taxable values in the county peaked back in 07 and 08. Then we begin to see the decline in valuation, which translates to tax revenues also decline, and begin to climb out of that era during the 12-13 period. And we've seen some steady growth since then. So now in fiscal year 19-20, which we're in now, those taxable values are just barely above where they were, back in 07-08. So our predecessor boards had some challenges as to how to get through those times when the revenues were down and the demand for services weren't down, but the revenues were. So now we're back to that same level we were 10 or 12 years ago, and the foreseeable future appears to be steady increases going forward, which is what the chart reflects of those increases. Now, recent events with the coronavirus, how is that going to affect us? Probably not drastically in total revenues, but there will be some slight decline in sales tax revenues and some of those consumer activated things. But we'll just have to take that as it comes. Yeah, deal with it at the time. Another chart that is draw attention to is this big red ball here. All ad valorem taxes, which is all property taxes, both your home and your land, as well as business property and business equipment, tangible personal property. Not only does a grocery store or a warehouse have the land and the building tax, but the equipment inside that building is also taxed at the same rate. So that's all referred to as ad valorem, both real estate as well as tangible personal property. And the estimated value for that in this current fiscal year total is $198 million. The rest of the budget is made up of other revenues, other charges, and miscellaneous fees that are collected. But the property tax is the one that hits people most. You know, when do I get my tax bill in November? You know, how much have I got to write this check for? Or fortunately, most people have that built into their mortgage payment, and it's there when they need to be paid. But I've put this in perspective. Of this $198 million, 90% of those dollars are dedicated to running the sheriff's office, both the law enforcement as well as the jails. So the county really relies on a small part of ad valorem to run its daily operations, but a lot of revenue from other sources keeps the doors open.
So again, you said 90%?
90% of all ad valorem is used to run the jail and law enforcement. An interesting thing, when someone is arrested or becomes in custody of a jail system, the county, the public, is responsible for their health care needs while they're in jail. Now, we have a very, very sophisticated and well-manned and staffed infirmary inside the jail. And for whatever sniffles and sneezes someone has inside the jail, they're taken care of. But if they need something special, even chemo or dialysis or some other extended medical treatment, they go outside the jail for the clinics and hospitals for that treatment. Just a few years ago, that outside the county jail medical treatment was about $4 or $5 million. Today, it's over $11 million and growing. We have an aging inmate population. Some of the lifestyles that they experience in their 20s, 30s, and 40s are now catching up with them. And these are folks that are not always yet adjudicated guilty, but they're in the custody of our county jail system, and we have that responsibility to take care of them. That $11 million is not in the sheriff's budget. That's in the general fund that the county commission has to accommodate. And so we're working with the sheriff's office, with the judicial system, the judges, and the whole law enforcement situation to help minimize that. But it is a growing concern. Another challenge that faces us is road capacity needs throughout the county. The county, on this particular map, we have divided the county into planning zones. While they somewhat reflect the district zones we referred to earlier, they're not entirely that, but planning purposes because they have common growth pressures. Some time ago, the tilt between the population on the east side of the county and the west side of the county did, like a teeter-totter, it did tilt to the east. Till a few years ago, majority of the population was on the west side of the county.
Yeah.
That's not the case anymore. And the west side of the county has about the equal population as the east, but the east side of the county has half the lane miles of road that the west side of the county has. So we're going to have to do some catch up to provide, meet the transportation needs on the east side of the county. And what this map reflects is where those growth pressures are. Is anticipated that 73 lane miles will be needed on the the west side of the county, just 34 miles in the south half of the county, but 62% of the demand for new road capacity will be in that northeast quadrant of the county. That anybody that lives in that part of the county realizes the pressures that we're facing in that area.
Wow.
And it's going to be challenging to meet that need. This graph is probably, or this chart is probably overwhelming. On the next one, talk about significant capital improvement projects. Lake Wilson Road, for example, is top of the list. Just 1 mile road in the northeast part of the county, 1 mile long, from Ronald Reagan Parkway north to the county line. That road moving from 2 lanes to 4 lanes will cost $25 million for 1 lane mile of 2 lane miles. We're adding 2 lanes. And it's going to take almost 5 years to get it from conception to conclusion.
Wow.
Someone pointed out that we won World War II in 4 years, and it's going to take 5 years to build this road. But that's probably apples and oranges, but it's an interesting observation. We also are embarking on West Pipkin Road to improve that from Hardin back to the west in front of the Geico building, where it's already 4 lane, and then providing for 3 lanes back to the east from Hardin to Florida Avenue. We'd like to be able to make that 4 lane, but simply don't have the revenue stream, to support that at this time. Perhaps we'll get that on the next list. So while we have $441 million of these road projects in the pipeline today, they are funded, the money is in the bank. We are going through design and engineering and permitting and right-of-way acquisition today. The money is in the bank. That's the good news. The bad news is there's $700 million of unfunded demands for projects that were referred to back on the earlier page, the demands for in the northeast part of the county. This next map kind of identifies where those unfunded capacity projects lie. And as we stated, the west half of the county is in pretty good shape. The east half in that northeast area is where the deficiency is, and we've got to do a lot of catching up to do. It's a challenge. It's going to be very difficult to meet this demand. The commission often meets with chamber groups or vision groups from around the county, high school kids that come through, and other business leaders that meet with the county, and we have a dialogue and exchange. And it was a bit poignant recently. A young lady was with us and raised her hand for the question and looked at us and said, "What are you going to do about the traffic situation where I live in the northeast part of the county in the years to come?" And it kind of caught me by surprise. Shouldn't have. And as I pondered my answer, the sad thing is, young lady, this is as good as it's going to get in your lifetime.
Wow.
The time and the resources it takes to respond to these demands are so long and so voluminous. It's really going to be a challenge. Now, working with our city partners, we try to engage the state DOT to help and recognize the demands and the needs, and to a lesser degree from the federal level. But it's a huge undertaking that probably our greatest challenge right now. Many of our other issues have paths to success. Our water cooperative has brought the cities together to address our long-range water supply needs. The county has made a priority of our EMS and fire staffing that has not kept pace with growth, and now we have a path to make sure that that is the case. We give our first responders the tools and the training and the equipment they need to protect the property and the lives in Polk County. So that is on a path. We have 4 fire stations under construction at this time, and we have 4 on the drawing boards when that's done. And I look forward to providing facilities that these firefighters, paramedics, young men and women, because it's a young man and woman's occupation, not an old guy's occupation. They deserve those facilities. It's not Taj Mahal, but it's very comfortable, it's very functional and durable. It's fun, it is challenging. And the benefit of bringing different people from different parts of the county representing the citizens of Polk County to use our varied backgrounds, our varied experiences in making these tough choices to set priorities. Absolutely, without a doubt, first priority is public safety. Law enforcement, fire, EMS services, that is our highest priority. That's what government is here to do. Then we start taking the resources after that and we assign them to the other challenges: roads, drainage, transportation, then we start working on the things that make life enjoyable, parks and recreation, Circle B and those kind of things. And so as that priority list, you start winding down, there's less and less resources for that. But I think this board has done a commendable job and been responsive, and we just keep doing what we can.
Well, thank you very much for your hard work and for this show. I mean, this was meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts, but it was very interesting. Thank you very much for sharing it.
My privilege. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of the Commissioner's Report.
Selfless service is the guiding principle of every Army National Guard soldier. They have a stake in the well-being of the neighborhoods where they live and work. To be an Army National Guard soldier is to serve something greater than yourself. Learn more at nationalguard.com.
Hello and welcome to the Commissioner's Report. I'm your host, Tricia Pichette. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Commissioner and Board Chairman Bill Braswell about the state of agriculture in Polk County and the rest of the nation. Thank you for joining us, Commissioner.
Glad to be here.
Now, let's start. We got a lot to cover here.
Sure.
So, for those who don't already know, what is your relationship with agriculture?
So I've been farming blueberries in Polk County for 20 years. I've got a caretaking consulting business. Through that, we've put about 500 acres of blueberries in Polk County. And then I'm involved in the political side of farming. I've been president of our State Grower Association, vice president of our National Association, board member of Florida Fruit and Vegetable Farm Bureau. But the real eye-opener position that I have had was I was appointed by the president to the USDA's Ag Technical Advisory Committee, and we met regularly with Ambassador Lighthizer on trade policy, and that was a real eye-opener.
Wow. Now, what are some of the current issues facing farming?
Well, I mean, like every other occupation business in the world, expenses. We've got a lot of wheels turning at the same time. The trying to keep costs down is a big deal for us. Labor is a huge deal for us. I just heard this morning, because of the coronavirus, that the H-2A labor from Mexico will not be coming to the U.S. now. That by and of itself is going to be a tremendous hit to agriculture all over the country. It basically means a lot of fruit won't get picked. But those are just two of them. We've got plenty of issues, regulatory issues, regulations. I feel like we're under attack from about 20 different angles.
Yeah. Now, how are some farmers adapting to these kinds of issues and changes?
Well, one thing we're trying to do is use technology to get the fruit out of the field, to pack it, to get it to the grocery store. Mechanization is taken over in a lot of ways. We've got machine harvesters, we've got automated packing lines, and by taking that human aspect out of it, I think we're getting a better product. But it's just, produce is generally picked by hand, and it's somebody's got to look at it, see if it's ripe, see if it's time to pick it, and right now the machines aren't quite there. They can go through and just kind of wipe everything off the bush, but then you got a lot of green fruit and rotten fruit and other stuff like that. So that's one aspect of it. Genetics is crazy important to agriculture right now. Just in the blueberry breeding program at the University of Florida and private programs around the world, they have created so much better quality plants which give off so much better quality fruit, you wouldn't believe it. I mean, the fruit quality has just gotten better every year. There's other technology, CRISPR, which is kind of like GMO, but it's not. Those are going to be a hard one to roll out with people because they have this, what I consider unreasonable fear of the unknown. And it's very unfortunate because GMO products from agriculture could really make a huge difference in the world. I've said it before, we can feed the world, we just can't afford to feed the world. And so if GMOs were more in use in other parts of the world, they could feed themselves.
Now, what are some of the biggest issues to farmers of Polk County specifically?
Yeah, and it'll sound crazy, but trade policy is the biggest issue for farming in Polk County and the state of Florida. Outside of the citrus greening issue, which has pretty much wiped out the citrus crop, and the trees, not just the crop, but the actual trees, they have their own set of problems. Everything else grown in the state is really the biggest issue is trade policy. And what I mean by that is Florida was or used to be the winter vegetable growing capital of the United States. We're kind of counter-seasonal to everybody else. You know, the summer is when you get vegetables everywhere else. We have it available in the wintertime. Well, when Mexico figured this out and Honduras figured this out and Guatemala, they all started growing the same crops that we grow. So now, like we were talking about earlier, people don't realize there's a season for growing different crops based on the weather. But because we can import it from a boat, from an airplane, from anywhere on this planet, people have no concept that, you know, it's coming from the other side of the planet to get here so you can have blueberries in December. And the trade policies right now favor everyone but Florida. There's a lot. I'll give you an example. Chile imports about 200 million pounds of blueberries into the United States. No state in the union is allowed to import a blueberry to Chile. The policy's one way and one way only. You know, when I was on the ATAC in D.C., we talked the ears off of the people who control the trade and negotiate the treaties. But you know, it's a slow process. We're having a meeting, well, maybe, in a couple of weeks in Plant City to talk to the ambassador again. But trade policy has to change for Florida agriculture to stay in business.
Now, what are the ramifications for the Polk County farmers or farmers in general about not being able to compete price-wise?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is, and we're all guilty of it, Americans like big bags of cheap food. It's just a fact. The grocery chains know it, and when Mexico drops the price of blueberries a penny, they go to Mexico. When we cut it another penny, they'll come back to us. What people have to realize is, first of all of these imports fall under a whole different set of standards. You know, we've got the FDA, the EPA, we've got FDAX, we've got everybody looking at us all the time. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, you know, because it means that we produce a quality product. You go outside of this country, you don't know what you're getting. And trust me, I've been outside of this country a lot looking at farms, and the rules are just, they don't exist. A good example is we're growing organic blueberries now. It is a well-known fact, all of the imported organic blueberries do not play by the rules. The USDA just allotted $40 million to the enforcement side to look at all of the fruit that's coming in from the Black Sea states, from Mexico, from Central America. None of it is complying with the organic rules, which mean no pesticide, no synthetic fertilizer. They're just doing whatever they want. And what they know is we do not test that when it comes into the United States. We can't. It's an overwhelming amount of fruit and vegetables coming in. It's randomly tested, maybe 1 out of 10,000 is tested, and almost every one of those comes back with some kind of pesticide on it. So the economic consequences are, if you want farmers to stay in business in the United States, you're going to have to pay a little bit higher price.
Yeah, and if you want something that you can depend on to be what it says it is.
Yeah, and you know, we're right in the middle of this coronavirus thing, and there's a lesson to be learned here. Last week, or maybe it was the beginning of this week, China insinuated that they may not make medicine, or at least not ship it to the United States to handle this outbreak. In 1973, I turned 16 years old. On my 16th birthday, I bought a used car and got my driver's license. I was ready to go. 2 months later, the oil embargo hit. People today don't realize the government shut us down. We were shut down. You couldn't drive a car. Fuel was rationed. You had to wait all day to get a tank of gas if you could get it. And there's no reason that what China is threatening to do to us now, the Arab states did to us then, the producers of our food could do to us in the future. And the problem with the food chain idea is oil, they can turn it off and on. Medicine, they can turn it off and on. If they turn off the food and it's turned off for 2 weeks, it's no longer food. It's mush. And so you're now 180 days from having another crop. So it's not something we can just turn off and on. So what's important is for people to it's just being aware of what you're buying, where it's coming from, and what are the consequences.
Yeah. So how can we help the farming industry?
Buy American. I mean, that's what it really gets down to. There's a name a lot of people recognize, Lawton Childs. His son, Bud Childs, and I are friends, and Bud has begun this campaign. We're calling it American Grown. And it's not a big aggressive campaign. What we really want are the consumers of the United States to, number one, get more in touch with where their food comes from, how it's grown, who grows it. Once they do that, I think they'll realize that quality, taste, flavor, they can get all those things if they, now the buy local thing, it just hasn't panned out because what's local? I mean, is it next door? Is it in Virginia? Who knows? But the Buy American, that means that the delivery time was much, much shorter. The fruit is going to be much, much fresher. On top of the fact it's been tested and checked and all of those things. But most people just simply don't have any connection with farming, farmers, their food. Their connection is Publix. Yeah. And that's kind of where it ends. And we hope through this campaign, it's called American Grown. Mm-hmm. The website is americangrown.com, I believe, but I hope you'll flash up the website while we're talking. But it kind of outlines what we're trying to do. We're just trying to make farmers aware that their buyers don't know where their food comes from. We're trying to make the buyers aware that you need to find out where your food is coming from. And we don't want to get in the situation where we're dependent on somebody else to feed us. That would be bad.
Yes, it would. And having said that, to some extent, the stores they're starting to respond. I mean, I can go into a store now and know where some of the goods I'm about to buy come from. There's a little sign that tells me that.
Right.
Those are new.
Well, one thing, if you want to buy food from Florida, produced in Florida, we've got the Fresh from Florida sticker that the Florida Department of Agriculture, you have to join that organization, and they allow you to use that sticker on your food. But it means the food was grown right here in Florida, and it's very important to look for that. But where it really gets tricky, if you pick up a package of, we'll say, blueberries, and the company is a United States company, you'll see their address. They do this intentionally. Their address will be larger. And then somewhere on there, they have to say where the food came from. And it may say product of Mexico, but it'll be in little teeny type, and their California address will be in big type. So people pick it up, they go, oh, it's California, it's American grown, when in fact it's not. So ultimately, we would like to have a certification process because we already go through a lot of certificate. We have food safety audits, I have organic audits. All of the retailers are kind of trying to one-up each other on making it difficult to send produce to them. They have sustainability audits. They have economic sustainability. I mean, it's crazy stuff. But what we want to do, like I said, is make people aware that they just got to pick that thing up and look at it. And when they do that, they'll realize that they really are buying a product made in the United States of a quality that they can count on. If you look back over the decades at where all of these E. coli problems have come from, with the exception of one out in Colorado, they've all either originated south of our border, or actually we had a listeria outbreak that came in from Europe. But none of it ever starts here. It gets blended in with food produced in the United States. And when you go to the produce aisle, there's product from Mexico and product from the U.S. sitting next to each other. And you just have to pick it up and look at it. But you'll see through history all of the bad stuff has come from somewhere else.
Well, this has been fascinating. Thank you so much.
Well, I enjoyed being here. And if I can just say one thing, if people can go to the website, take a look, see what they can do. One thing we are asking is if you don't see American-made produce in the produce department, ask for it. We all know if you go to the Publix produce manager, you'll get what you ask for. And that's what we're asking people to do because we think it's important.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoyed it.
And thank you for joining us for another edition of the Commissioner's Report.